I've been trying to get back into shape. I just turned 37 at the end of August, and I was determined to start running again. One night about a month later, I was running on a back road outside Waterloo, and something chased me that I can't make heads or tails of. I picked out a stretch of county road that was not too far from my home. I would usually set out around 7 or 8, run a couple miles, turn around, and head back. One night, life got in the way, and it was already after dark. I didn't want to give in, so I decided to do the run anyway. The road is flat and pleasant to run on. There's almost no traffic, especially now that it was after dark. The fields on either side of me were thick with tall corn stalks. It felt like running through a tunnel with a clear sky above. It was quite pretty, actually. I stopped at the 2.5-mile marker to take a drink and then turn around. I took a moment to appreciate a cool breeze blowing in when I heard something moving through the corn. It came to a stop a few rows in. It had to be big because I could see the stalks swaying. I figured it was my imagination playing up. Maybe it was just the wind. I took a deep breath and started off back to my car. Just as soon as I got going, the thing in the corn started to, just clomping along next to me out of sight. I stopped, and it stopped. I stood still and tried to see into the rows to get a look at what was pacing me, but it was too dark. I couldn't hear anything either. I started sidestepping slowly down the road. Nothing. When I picked up the pace to a fast walk, it ran up to meet my pace. I had enough. My lizard brain kicked in, and I booked it as fast as I've ever gone in my life. All the while, this thing was keeping up. I could see ahead that there was a gap in the rows. As I passed that point, I turned enough to look. What I saw was, well, something like a man running, but with long rabbit-like ears on top of its head. It was all black and pretty skinny. After passing the gap, I could hear the thing break out of the corn behind me, cross the road, and enter the field on the other side. Finally, my car was visible at the crossroad. I pulled out my keys and managed to press the remote starter. The engine turned over, and the lights came on. At the same time, I hit the panic button. I don't know if the light or noise scared it off, or it just gave me some space, but I couldn't hear it running anymore. When I got to the car, I flew in the passenger side, climbed over the console, and made a beeline to there. I haven't been back on that road yet, but it's not out of the question. You can bet money that I won't be going back out there at night. Anyone else encountered anything strange around Waterloo? Tunnel entrance not far from where my dad worked. My friends and I always wanted to explore it, but we were too scared to try. One day, my friends, Miguel and Esteban, volunteered to go in first. Miguel never came out. My dad worked as a custodian at the nearby hospital, where he mostly swept up and cleaned God knows what. My friends and I were aged 9 to 11 years old, and in those days, kids were allowed to wander all over. Not like kids today. The tunnel entrance was less than a half-mile from the hospital, near a dry creek bed. There were bars that blocked the tunnel, but they were old and mostly rusted out. We used a pipe we found to pry apart the bars wide enough to squeeze through. The tunnel was around 10 feet in diameter and looked like it ran in a straight line towards the hospital. In the ceiling every 50 feet or so was a small grate that let light in from above ground. Still, it was very dark and spooky. After much debate, we decided Miguel and Esteban would take a flashlight and walk down the tunnel as far as they could, whistling as they went. Javier and I would follow above ground and listen for the sound to see how far they got before getting scared and coming back. So in they went, whistling some melody and giggling. Javier and I ran up the hill to the first grate, then the next. After the third grate, there was an old fence blocking the way to the fourth. We ran down it until we found the end and came back on track. We got to the fourth grate but didn't hear anything. Just to be sure we didn't fall behind, we ran to the fifth, nothing. Thinking they turned around, we went back to the entrance to hear their heroic tale. When we got to the entrance, only Esteban emerged from the shadows, without a flashlight and without Miguel. We asked Esteban what happened, but he wouldn't say. His skin was pale, and he was sweating bullets. Neither of us wanted to go in without a light, and we didn't want to get in trouble either. We went home. I guess Miguel's parents got worried. They called my house, and my mom made me tell them what happened. I now regret not saying something sooner, but we were kids. There was a big search for Miguel that lasted for days, but they never found any trace of him. Esteban never recovered. In fact, I think he ended up at the same hospital my dad worked at. He said that folks who worked there believed that tunnel was cursed by something truly evil. The hospital has been closed for years now. I don't know what happened to Esteban, but he must have been shipped off somewhere else if he's still alive. I think the tunnel is still around, but I haven't lived there since I was a kid. I was pretty afraid of the dark. However, unlike most kids, I had a very good reason. You probably won't believe me, but I'm gonna tell it anyway. I was 10 years old. I know that because it was my birthday. I got a Nintendo, Super Mario, and Duck Hunt. It was awesome. I played those games all day. Drove my parents crazy. Bedtime came, and I pleaded with my dad to let me stay up to play a bit longer. You'll burn your eyes out on that thing. Defeated, I marched up to my room. But I didn't sleep. No, I waited. I stayed up and waited for the sound of the TV to quiet downstairs. My parents had gone to bed. I slowly opened my bedroom door, creaked down the stairs, and planted myself back on the couch. With the volume all the way down so my parents wouldn't wake up, I played for another 10 minutes or so when I was blinded by a light from outside. It was our neighbor's porch light. His dog was going nuts, so he must have gone out to shush him. Finally, the light went out, and I was no longer distracted. I pew-pewed a few more ducks and was finally getting ready to head to my room. The light came on again. It went off, on, off in a rhythm. I got up to look out the window. Before I got further than standing up, I realized the light was on, but something was moving back and forth in front of the window, blocking and uncovering the light. The thing stopped swaying, and I got a chance to look at it. Believe me when I say I was just a tad surprised by what I saw. It was a dang caveman. He had dark gray skin, thick bushy eyebrows. A unibrow, actually. He had thick wide lips that went from ear to ear and a nose that was small for his face. His eyes were black and looked deep-set in the sockets. No hair, I could see. Not only did I see his face, but he had one of his hands pressed up against the window. I could see it was paler than his face, and it looked grimy as hell. It was greasy, like he'd been digging in some nasty garbage. We locked eyes for a few seconds. Then he grinned a big, goofy grin full of chiclet teeth. They were surprisingly white and straight. It didn't look like he had all of them, but the ones he did looked good. When the hallway light came on behind me, the caveman pulled away from the window and vanished. My dad shouted down the stairs for me to get to bed, or else. I went to bed, but I sure didn't go to sleep, not until the sun was almost up. That was a rough day at school. I told my friends and my teacher what I saw. None of them believed me. I told my parents when I got home, but they didn't either. Maybe I dreamed it all up from too much cake, video games, and lack of sleep. But I swear I remember it like it was real life, even now 30 years later. My window blinds closed at night, and I'll tell you why. Growing up, we lived in a cabin in the woods. My father worked nights, so it was just my mother and me. One night, we were finishing dinner in the kitchen. Mom was clearing the table and told me to clean the dishes. I was waiting for the hot water when I noticed the light shift outside. My reflection made it hard to see, but there was something there. It looked like a face. It was staring back at me. I was stunned, watching its red eyes pan around. It was examining me, the sink, the room around me. My mom dropped some forks into the sink. The clang snapped me out of it, and I stepped away from the window. When I felt safe, I looked back. It wasn't there anymore. I didn't say anything to my parents, because why would they believe me? I never saw it again, but I still keep my blinds closed at night to this day. I loved trekking out as deep as I could to get away from the yahoos. Now I don't hunt or camp after what I saw in '94. I had already spent a night at a favorite spot. I set up a small camp and scouted the area. There was plenty of sign, and I was champing at the bit. On the second night, I was laying in my tent, enjoying the quiet anticipation of getting into my stand that morning when I saw a light pass over the tent. There's no way another hunter is out here, I thought. It passed again, slower this time. Now I've got goosebumps. I quietly put on my boots and gathered my bow and my knife. I slowly unzipped the tent and waited. The light passed a third time, and this time stayed on the tent. I had enough. I sprang out of the tent, ready for a fight. I burst out of the tent to see who was messing with me, but there was no one there. Just a dim light on my camp. I spun around to try and see where the light was coming from. It was as if the glow came from everywhere. There was no lantern, fire, nothing. I stood there, dumbfounded. The air was dead quiet. I switched on my flashlight, and the glow blinked out. That's when I heard a deep, powerful rumble from behind my tent. It was like standing next to a semi-turning over. I turned in time to witness a massive black shape rise over the tent. I wanted to run, but my feet were stuck to the ground. It rose up into the tree cover, and it was gone. My feet could move again, so I dove back into my tent. I stayed awake all night and broke camp as soon as dawn came. I haven't been back into the woods since that night.